Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the CCA CX4. So in my last video we did the CX10, which is the big brother, the 4 plus 1. This is the 1DD 1BA version, sort of a more affordable, not quite the same shell, same case, but not quite the same sound, and we'll get to that in a few. Packaging is actually a little better too because it's got a nice beautiful picture, whereas the CCX10 was kind of a more rigid, plain white box. So I would like to thank the Better Audio store on Amazon for shipping this out to me. If you go there today, it's $39.99, which I guess is marked down from about $46, 15% off. So do check out the Better Audio store on Amazon if you have a chance. And thank you for sending that. So let's get into the CX4. So one, as I said about the CX10, the battery life is, kind of marginally bad. It's kind of short. It's about 2 hours. The CX4 doesn't really change that, even though there's less drivers. It's still about the same. In about an hour, it just depends on my phone. It either starts at 100% or starts about 90%. After about an hour, you're kind of in that 40%, 50%, depending on where you started. I don't know, 40% per hour was about the average I was looking at. So same fit. The shells are, I think, identically the same, but the tips, I actually chose different tips, and we'll see if we can take a quick. So on the CX10, I talked about these bullet shape that actually brought out the bass, and that works on the CX10. The other ones are these larger, more umbrella shaped tips that I use on the CX4 because they give you less bass. The CX4 is definitely more bassy than the CX10. I think a lot of people said the CX10 was slightly bass light, and I think I would call this one a little bass heavy, and it gets a bit overwhelming. So I definitely chose the tips with the less bass for the CX4. So less drivers, less problems. I do think that, in general, if you gave the CX4 to random person, random track, they would probably like it more than the CX10 because it's got a kind of a more normalish V-shaped sound, as opposed to this, which went for a kind of more detailed. It was brighter. Some tracks are definitely going to sound better, but this one is probably going to be more consistent with your across tracks in your playlist. And that was kind of generally, what I found was there were more tracks in my playlist sounded reasonable, whereas the CX10, it was just more of a chance that it was too recessed, too bright. There was just more problems across tracks than I have with the CX4. So sound wise, like I said, go with less bass tips, and because if you don't, it's going to be really bassy, really muddy, quite dark. But if you go with the other tips, then you got to watch your brightness as well. So, but I do think in general, whereas the CX10 was quite detailed and quite sharp, this is kind of a more relaxed sound. I think it's just more going to be generally more pleasing to more people. But do watch the amount of bass because it will sort of ruin your experience if there's too much coming through. So, like I said, so the bass out of the box with those bigger tips, it needs more shape, texture, definition. It just needs to be refined quite a bit. It's just kind of a big, muddy presence that doesn't really add too much other than, this little rumble that consistently goes through your track. But it was kind of odd that it doesn't really sound all that great, but it was quite emphasized with those other tips. So if you can get that sub bass down, your mid bass is actually quite good, but you got to get rid of this other bit that's overwhelming. So use the tips, use different tips, use your favorite tips. Either way, pay attention to how much sub bass is coming through, and the mid bass will actually pop up a bit and sound much better. So the mids, you still have this recess problem that exists on both of them, and the vocals can sound recessed, can sound thin, but on the CX4, it's just compounded by all that bass, and you end up with something that's even more recessed and more hazy. So get rid of it, get rid of that bass, and it opens up the mids quite a bit, and you kind of get a sense of clarity, but still kind of recessed. But I think it sounds much better with much less bass than going for that full bass sound. That I don't know if that was their intention or not, but definitely open up your mids to the point where vocals will actually sound quite good. But you got to get around the recess problem, which is going to be a non-starter for some people. So the treble, pretty similar to the CX10. I do think it's at a lower level. It's not as noticeable. This one went for a more detailed and sharp presentation. This is kind of this more relaxed, more polite. So if you listen to it closely, it's the same problem. I think it's the same exact driver. The cymbal sound, like a cymbal soundish puff of air is there's almost no body to it, and so I think the same driver, same problem exists. It's just less noticeable on the CX4. So I think that actually works in its favor. It's this less drivers, less problems. It's definitely not as noticeable. So Soundstage is one thing that the CX10 actually got quite right, but didn't transfer over to the CX4. And on the CX4, I think it lost a bit of fun and engagement. The Soundstage sort of wraps around your head on the CX10. On the CX4, it's more of an inner ear soundstage, and it's not so in your head that it's cramped, but it's pretty much at your ears, and you never really forget that you have a pair of earbuds in your ear, and it will extend slightly beyond your ears, but really not much. Nothing like the CX10, which actually for some tracks it was actually quite good, and a nice full engaging soundstage. This is more of a traditional, but the vocals take up a nice amount of space, so it's not. I never got the feeling that it was horrible and cramped, and they needed to open it up. It was, it was probably about right for this set of earbuds at that price, perhaps. So that's about it. Just a quick run through on the CX4. So again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.